UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is visiting Northern Ireland for talks. A major focus of the trip is the Northern Ireland Protocol, the agreement over how goods move between the Republic of Ireland, which is part of the European Union, and Northern Ireland, which is still part of the United Kingdom. Johnson says the protocol needs to change due to COVID-19 and the cost of living crisis. However, the EU is warning of a possible trade war if the UK acts unilaterally. For more on this, eNCA correspondent in London, Olly Barratt, joins us. Hello, Olly. So, first of all, let's look at what's been happening in Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin, the political party that for many years was linked to the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, has won the most votes. They still have to form a government, though. So talk to me about what Boris Johnson is doing in that regard today.
Well, Boris Johnson is in Northern Ireland trying to encourage the political parties there to go ahead and form a government. The way that power sharing works in Northern Ireland is that the parties effectively have to run the government together. They take up the senior posts in a way that is divided up between them. And so Sinn Féin are in position to take on the First Minister role in Northern Ireland, and the DUP, which is a unionist party which came second, would normally take on the Deputy First Minister post. There are various other allocations to form a government and an executive at the Stormont Assembly, which is the regional parliament, really. But because of the issues around the Northern Ireland Protocol, the DUP, the unionists, say they're not going to take part in forming a government. So we're really at a stalemate, and Boris Johnson has gone to Northern Ireland to say it's time for politicians there to get back to work, to try and encourage them to put some of those issues aside and get on with forming a government to deal with things, he says, like, for example, the cost of living crisis.
He says that he wants to change aspects and sort of update aspects of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and he cited COVID and indeed that cost of living crisis. What does he exactly want to change? Because, I mean, it's a highly complicated issue, but it was so difficult to negotiate in the first place, wasn't it?
Really, really complicated, and Boris Johnson's critics would say, we told you this would happen if this was sorted out in this way. But actually the government here in London says that it's not really necessarily even a problem with the protocol itself that was negotiated. It's the way that it's being implemented, they would say, by the European Union. What annoys the unionists in Northern Ireland so much, the DUP and other unionist parties, is that they believe that too many checks are having to be carried out, for example, on goods that move from the rest of the UK into Northern Ireland, and that is to try and keep that border open between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. But the DUP would say, well, that effectively means you're putting a border down the middle of the United Kingdom. You're separating us in Northern Ireland from our fellow Brits in the rest of the country. And so they want to see, and Boris Johnson also wants to see, some of those checks eased, other ways found to make sure that the two sides can trust each other and allow goods to move in a much freer manner. The European Union says, look, we had to sign some kind of deal like this. You signed up to it. We are absolutely not renegotiating it. And you have three positions really here broadly. The DUP say you have to scrap the whole Northern Ireland Protocol. Boris Johnson says we don't want to scrap it. We want to renegotiate it and change bits of it. The European Union is saying we can fiddle around the edges of the protocol, but we're not renegotiating it. So at some point there, we're going to have to see compromise from all three of those positions, really, if we are to find a deal, and a deal that can be found accommodations for all sides, which would allow things to move forward, not just with the protocol and to avoid a trade war with the European Union, but also, as we started by discussing, politics in Northern Ireland and safeguarding the peace process there.
How are relations with the European Union and Britain over this issue? Could it really devolve into a trade war?
Very tense things are getting, again, between London and Brussels, and the European Union is really saying, if you do act unilaterally, then it could lead to a trade war. Now, we're some way off that, because what's going to happen on Tuesday is the Foreign Secretary will set out in Parliament what legislation would look like that the British government proposes to bring forward so that it could act unilaterally if it didn't get compromises from the European Union. That would then have to be debated in Parliament, voted on, it would go to the House of Lords and come back, probably with some changes. We're some way off that legislation actually being put into place, and at that point the European Union might not respond immediately anyway. So the UK government's buying itself a little bit of time here, playing hardball to try and get some changes from the European Union, but Brussels is absolutely saying that this could threaten the whole of the Brexit deal reached between the UK and the European Union if Britain acts in this unilateral fashion. So things are getting very tense indeed. It's also just briefly worth pointing out the interesting dynamic here that the UK is becoming really ever more friendly with quite a few European Union member states. Boris Johnson was in Sweden and Finland last week offering security guarantees that were very much welcomed by those countries as they sign up to join the NATO military organisation. So that's an extra dynamic just to consider here as well, that behind the scenes the UK will, I'm sure, be pushing some of these issues with those individual European countries and saying, look, if you could just put a bit of pressure on Brussels for us, that will help.
Yeah, of course, there's been so much unity over the Ukraine issue. And of course, everyone's feeling the impact with the cost of living crisis, which of course is exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. Fuel and inflation are up. Here in South Africa, we're feeling it as well. Inflation is likely to hit 6%. What's going on in the UK and what measures are being proposed and seriously discussed to ease the burden for people?
Very similar issues here. We've just had word today that diesel per litre has hit £1.80. That is a record, another record, and that's about 35 and a bit rand. And motoring organisations say that we're seeing record prices and they expect them to go higher still. There's a huge debate about the cost of living crisis here and what the government can or should be doing to ease it. The government would say it's already acted in some ways with some rebates on energy bills, for example, but critics of the government say it really isn't going far enough. And we've had a huge row today because a cabinet minister seemed to be suggesting that one thing households could do to respond individually to the cost of living crisis is take on more hours at work. That has seen her roundly criticised by opposition politicians who say that she has demonstrated that she is out of touch. But the government is also acknowledging that a lot of these issues are not things that it can deal with for every household up and down the country as prices continue to spike in all manners of their weekly and monthly budgeting. But as I say, real pressure from the opposition to do more now. One thing that the government may end up being forced to do is a windfall tax on some of those energy companies that have been making record profits off the back of those record prices.
All right, thank you so much. That's our UK correspondent in London, Olly Barratt.